Look at this triangle. These dots were abstracted from a photograph of a leg. This mark was associated with an intuition of meaning, perhaps as a communication with a non-human intelligence. They showed up on the leg with an intuition of meaning, and there was no reasonable explanation. Take a good look. This triangle will be our guide today. Is it an equilateral triangle? Is it isosceles? Is it perfect? Don't forget, these dots come from a photograph taken at an awkward angle. There are half a dozen like it that display slightly different geometries because of the slightly different perspective. Maybe it's shaped like the Great Pyramid. How can you know? These are just 3 dots. Are they even a triangle? If these 3 dots were a message or a communication from non-human intelligence, what would that message be? How could we respond? This is a presentation of D-SETI, the dream study of extraterrestrial intelligence. This is called Geometric SETI through Strange Body Marks. SETI, with the C, stands for Communication with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So this is a lengthy presentation. I invite you to take your time with it as you see fit, to move backwards and forwards using the timestamps, and to use video speed controller. So without further ado, we'll go through the disclaimers, discovery of a series of congruences that's just absolutely incredible, and the reason why I'm putting forward this presentation. I want to contextualize that in human-initiated contact experience. I will observe this pattern of a non-harmful geometric body mark that I'm terming the Near Equilateral Triangle, acronym to NET, N-E-T. We'll go through some ruler and compass constructions related to that discovery. We'll present some case studies associated with it, and we'll talk about next steps. So, regarding disclaimers, this is documentation of inquiry. This is not a final statement. I'll likely write this up into an article or a blog post that really contextualizes or synthesizes everything I'm discovering and saying, but right now I'm seeking the words to use and the way to present it, which is why I'm documenting this. Geometry is very easy to push into confirmation bias, and it does require your active discernment. Abduction and dreams are triggering and taboo topics, so please do consider if now is a good time to continue exploring geometric body marks and strange dreams of extraterrestrials. All marks appear to be not self-inflicted. All marks appear to be mysterious and non-harmful, meaning they're not explained by conventional causes. All marks were found on the public internet or directly sent to me. Right. This is what kicks it off, an observation of anomalous data. There are non-harmful body marks that mysteriously appear in association with extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, intuitions, or dreams. These are assumed to be psychosomatic or synchronistic with natural accidents, which are possibly connected with light orb UAPs. That's what I'm saying here now. So if we look to reports of light orb UAPs, we will see marks upon the body that are geometric in nature, characterized by the framework I'm presenting, and I'm assuming that those marks to appear psychosomatically or synchronistically. And there's other mechanisms that could be hypothesized, but those are the ones that seem most conservative at this moment. This is the hypothesis. Body marks and UAP formations or pulsations are a form of communication with extraterrestrial intelligence, that's SETI communication, based upon the universal language of ruler and compass geometry. Now, you might be familiar with Contact, where they use the mathematical language, the movie with the radio telescopes and Jamie Foster, who talks to an alien civilization, or even the movie Arrival. They're using math as a universal language of communication. So my hypothesis here is that communication is primarily psychic, similar to the Mandala practice or Jungian active imagination, yet it also involves transmission of mathematical ideas beyond the comprehension of the experiencer. So it's primarily a spiritual aesthetic experience, secondarily perhaps even a math experience. My research method is simple. I use creative drawing. So it's creative drawing, simple Euclidean geometric constructions of geometric body marks and formation it receives the mathematical or the psi communication. So I'm saying the act of creative drawing with, for me, it's the pencil, the ruler, the compass. It receives the message of the mathematical intuition, as well as any psi communication. That might be telepathy or dreams or anything, or intuitions. The elegance of the construction is like tuning the frequency of the radio. I start with any construction I can, and then I seek a construction based upon the Vesica Pisces, which is a sacred geometric construction. We'll talk about that. As division of the unity, the primordial fractalization. I'm offering this series of descriptions of what I do, the construction based on Vesica Pisces, as division of unity, the primordial fractalization, to introduce some concepts associated with Jimmy Blanchette's work, which I'll talk about in this presentation. The discovery. Constructions for a series of anomalous triangles based upon a single geometric framework derived from the Vesica Pisces. That's what I'm presenting here. Two of the triangle shapes were video documented within a series of human-initiated contact experiences by Jimmy Blanchette, and the third was connected with a collaborator that connects the series with similar body marks. So there's all these different triangles, and there is a theme that runs through it. In part, it's a synchronicity theme. In part, it's a communication around these topics theme. In part, it's a human-initiated contact context. So the implications of this: the unique geometric property of body mark triangles may prove the reality of associated extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, intuitions, dreams, or psi event. So I'm saying that the unique property, the shape of those triangles, especially if it's apprehended as one thing but is actually another thing, may be proof, right? This confusion between, oh, that's an equilateral triangle and is actually a discernible triangle of a different proportion, that's meaningful and may be proof. The language of communication may be Euclidean constructive geometry, and that means it involves both number, which is based upon the proportion to the width of the Vesica Pisces, and intuition, which is geometric and possibly spiritual. And we have a really good precedence of spiritual geometric communication in the history of Platonism. Another implication is that the association with a CE5 or human-initiated contact method suggests a repeatable experimental method similar to at least parapsychology. Isn't that incredible? So if the abduction researchers in the past identified the body marks as equilateral triangles that were actually the observed triangle, or even could be drawn with similar methods, then their misapprehension of the triangle as equilateral may be seen as proof for a real encounter phenomena, at least at a transpersonal and or collective unconscious level. So that's a little complicated. I'm going to read it again. And this is around the misapprehension of the triangle. So abduction researchers, they see an abductee. That abductee has a triangle on their body. They say, that's a perfect triangle. That's equilateral. That's proof of alien abduction. Now, if that triangle were this triangle I'm describing, that's a near equilateral triangle that's been observed in multiple cases, then it may actually be proof that there is some other phenomena happening that we're not actually identifying it accurately. And if it shows up true to form, not true to our expectations over years of abduction research, then it means something. So I'll read this again. If abduction researchers in the past identified the body marks as equilateral triangles that were actually similar to the observed triangle, or even could be drawn with similar methods, that's important, then their misapprehension of the triangle as equilateral may be seen as proof for a real encounter phenomena, at least at a transpersonal and or collective unconscious level. So I need to now give context for this discovery. This is the introduction video to the Universal Language video series. This is on my YouTube channel, D-SETI. As you can see, there's a playlist involving ruler and compass geometry. That's drawing geometry using only the ruler, the straight edge, and the compass. I look through crop circles, red grid mark phenomena, body marks, radio signals, and so on, to really put forward this inquiry into anomalous geometry as a means of communication with extraterrestrials, non-human intelligences. This came about because I had a body mark, a geometric body mark, I discovered in association with a series of lucid dreams around the time of the summer solstice. And then around the time of the winter solstice, not this last winter, but the following winter, the one before it, I had a series of lucid dreams again where dream characters explained to me the role of ruler and compass geometry in this inquiry and instructed me on its use and told me to use what I learned in the interpretation of my body marks. So in the course of this study, I came across this paper, SETI by Entanglement. It is the only peer-reviewed paper about dream telepathy as an instrument of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So I asterisk that because the journal is a little controversial according to Wikipedia. The suggested use of geometry as a universal language, it suggested the use of geometry as a universal language and as a means of signal authentication. And so they basically say if you receive a message that you don't understand personally, or most people don't, then that message could be proof of the non-human intelligence source of that message. So my first really deep dive into geometry involved this sighting. This is a data visualization of the pulsation pattern of a UAP that was filmed in the context of the UAP Consciousness Connection event at the Monroe Institute that involved experiencer Chris Bledsoe and Rob Freeman, as well as one of my first clients, Dan Berg. They had a human-initiated contact event, and they believe they saw a UFO light orb that was geosynchronous that may have took down the communication towers around them and responded to direct prayers and things like that. Actually, it was a geosynchronous satellite, likely Intelsat 29E, which had a fuel leak 3 years ago, which is why it wasn't showing up in the standard databases or the easy settings of the databases that the officials and government scientists surrounding Chris Bledsoe could not identify. But I ran with this under the impression, because all these officials were saying, hey, this is a UAP. I thought perhaps this is the best case of geometric communication. I made this data visualization. It is a video that goes through the video and demonstrates how geometric that signal is. The reason why it's geometric is because it's a tumbling satellite with geometric properties, generally involving division of a cylinder, I suppose, by half, and placement of these other panels or whatever that are reflecting the light as it tumbles. So this one I discovered, I got proof from a space scientist that this one actually is a satellite. It's not some UFO of God. It's not even unidentified at this point. But it is relevant, and this geometric key is essential to my inquiry. And so I say that it presented synchronicities in my life that were so very potent, in dreams as well, that were so very potent, that I have to include this as kind of a communication of non-human intelligence through geometry, even though I fully understand it comes from a tumbling geosynchronous satellite. All right. So we're now with Galithog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. This is by me and Galithog the Gray, the tall gray pictured on the book cover. It is an integral studies-based survey of body marks as physical evidence for alien abduction. I look through the literature. I present dozens of examples. I look through Bud Hopkins' lecture, and I present a lot of information from there. I'm doing something similar with Dr. Karla Turner coming up. It included a survey of my own body marks. I received about 4 dots and a line marks that were anomalous and geometric and kicked off my inquiry. And as well, a channeled chapter from my non-human intelligence dream character that I really came in contact with through a regression hypnosis session of my missing time episode I shared with my twin brother, where in the regression I got in contact with this character, Galithog the Gray. And within a week of that session, the hypnotist received an anomalous body mark that expressed the geometric construction of the extension of a line in golden ratio. For me, that was really beautiful to see. So I put forward my geometric SETI hypothesis in this book. You can get to it on my website, D-SETI.org. So throughout this time, I was puzzled by what I'm calling Near Equilateral Triangle puzzle. this image exemplifies it. It takes two of the cases I've looked at. One is from Mike Cleland, the dots in the skin. He's a researcher into UFOs and owl connections and synchronicities. The other is from a YouTube channel called Project Unity, who tells their story of human-initiated contact where he sees light orbs and then finds body mark. Now, I analyzed the geometry behind it and produced this construction with the blue lines and red circles, and I put it on top of this triangle from Mike Cleland. And it looks like, hey, it looks like there's a really strong fit. However, when you look really deep into it, you can see, well, the vertex is on the center of one dot, side of another, on the side of another, and it doesn't really make sense to me geometrically. There's something else that's going on there. And we'll get to it. I'll show you that. I observed this pattern in unconnected abductee narratives. So what I'm doing in this image, I'm showing you, hey, this is the pattern I'm seeing, and this is what I expected to see. So I expected to see equilateral triangles in what people call equilateral triangles. They go, this is a perfect equilateral triangle. It's proof of aliens. And I apply this framework that I know is not equilateral, which is the blue lines and the red and pink circles. And I know that's not equilateral because I've tried to match it to Project Unity's triangle mark and others. And I say, this framework is the clue for me. And I go, what is this? It shows that if the radius of one of the dots in the triangle, and this will be clearer in subsequent videos, but right here, there's a red circle. If we got one of those, and so the triangle was composed of each side. One of the sides was composed of one dot, and then three times the dot's length, and then another dot. So that equals 5 times the dot length for one side, 5 times the other side. And then we have something like 4.3. And so I thought, oh, wow, that's actually the clue. This is what I'm seeing in most equilateral triangles that are reported as equilateral actually have this pattern. So I go, what is going on here? This is a puzzle. And that will show up throughout this experience. That's why I'm talking about it. This is I'm being led into these frameworks and these geometries by these sorts of puzzles. Like, wow. So, and it does have those distinctive characteristics we'll explore through this presentation. Next contextualization is Jimmy Blanchette's human-initiated contact videos. I'm collaborating with Jimmy to write a book about his experiences. We have had synchronicities relating to the transmission of geometric ideas. We work together to send out a message using his radio antenna and recorded the response. And I wrote that up in my book, Missing Time Found. So the important thing to know is that he films the sky after sending out a message. He films the sky, and this is where we see light orb and UAP manifestations and other paranormal events with geometric themes. That's so he sends out the message. He goes through a period of observation, and in that period of observation, through looking at the sky in videos or looking at shortwave radios that click in different patterns, he's getting different geometric themes that is informing his discovery of, he calls it the genesis of creation. We're calling it geometric harmonics, but it's the system of geometry that thinks about physical constants differently, thinks about math a little bit differently in terms of harmonics. And it's associated in part with the experiencer Bruce Gotti, who saw UFO or something like that, and similarly started to receive geometric downloads. I look at Jimmy mostly in terms of number. So he's receiving this frequency, this NHI geometry frequency through mostly number and the harmonics through number. So what I'm presenting is through not number, but proportion or drawing. So through space, basically. So I believe that these are similar intuitions, but he is exploring the number aspect. And these frameworks are exploring the proportion or the drawn aspect. The best example of the communication is the golden ratio craft, which you can see examples in the bottom right thumbnail. There's a couple images of 3 dots of light that he calls the golden ratio craft. These look like light orbs that are in a formation, and that's a very particular formation that's shown up across 3 different sightings, basically. So now let's get to my own construction. This is about a year and a half ago. I figured this out. I had a body mark. The image up top is an image of my body mark. It has dots in a line, and they're geometrically positioned and sized. And so that's what the drawing in the middle with the red and blue circles are. And basically built it based on the size of the first dot. And I built it from left to right and was able to make a construction like that. And that method is very similar to that method of building the triangle with the sides of 5 and 4.3. Is starting with the size of a dot and working my way through the geometry using kind of naive techniques. This is a much more sophisticated example of my construction technique now. You can see everything's based upon the Vesica Pisces, which is that sacred geometric form composed of 2 circles, and that sort of, it's like the Mother Mary figure is used oftentimes in that iconography. So this is a much more elegant construction where you can see all of the placements of the dots relate to golden ratio constructions that are sort of nested and reflected. That's really sort of beautiful to me to see. That kind of difference is what I'm talking about. So I expect it, it's like there's this sort of clarification of understanding that I'm documenting here in this inquiry. So this is a difference. It's a really big difference in understanding. This says, hey, there's math here. This says, hey, there's math here that's elegant, beautiful, and can relate to other things. So I sent a CETI style message with Blanchette in the summer of 2022. I sought to express geometric understanding of the communications we're receiving through the ruler and compass design of a message. Basically, I wanted to say, return a hello. The golden ratio craft shows a naive understanding of that geometry or that message for me. So I did I'll show it to you shortly, kind of naive construction of that. I'm about to start a draft for the book with Blanchette on HICE work and sought to compose another message, which is why all of this has come out. I was like, I need to do a better version of the golden ratio craft. And then I made some discoveries based upon that exploration. So I discovered a new Vesica Pisces construction, which uses a framework that presented constructions for another orb triangle and an observed pattern in geometric body marks. So I figured out the construction and I go, I can use this construction for the other triangle Jimmy has and also the body marks that I just received recently. So let me show you. This is my first message. On the left, there's my dots in the line, body marks set within the Vesica Pisces, and I imply the constructions by adding in the lines. The center is a Pythagorean theorem puzzle that is based upon the CETI by entanglement paper. So if they present the proportion that is missing in this triangle to complete the a squared plus b squared equals c squared, there's some level of response there that's meaningful. And then finally on the right, we have a Vesica Pisces that holds the golden ratio craft. Now, as you can see, it doesn't extend the full width of the Vesica Pisces, which is against one of my first principles of drawing now. But this is an expression of where I was at the time, and it's really sort of a naive construction. This is a much better construction for the golden ratio craft, this elegant design, right? This is very, very elegant. Inspired everything else. I go, oh, I see how they're doing this now, which is basically you take the width of the figure, right? And you make that the Vesica Pisces. Then I divided that by the golden ratio. So this is 1/5. So this is 6.18 if this is 1. And so then I have this line here, and I observed it went through the vertex of the triangle, but I needed to understand how far down this line we needed to go in order to draw the circle. And so when I take the difference between the bisection point and the golden section point, and I use the intersection between the Vesica Pisces radius and the intersecting line that defines the golden ratio, and I use that to define the radius of a new circle, I can just I get an intersection between that circle and this dividing line, and that gives me the placement of the third dot. And that's a very elegant construction, very elegant. So there's a pattern I'm talking about that this made me think about. So it's an observed pattern of a near equilateral triangle. It has punctures, burn marks and near equilateral triangles ranging from fingernail size to hand size, sometimes in association with light orbs, UAPs, strange dreams, abduction narratives, ETNHI, encounter intuitions of meaning, is often apprehended as equilateral, yet discernibly not equilateral, often appearing quite isosceles. So it was first discovered, in my experience, on Project Unity, then on Skeptical Psychic, which we'll talk about, and then on many other cases, including Amy Ryland's. So it's a common theme in abduction experiences. If so basically every time I explore a new case, I go, where is the dream? And where is the triangle or body mark or kind of geometric trace evidence? And usually it's there, or it's sort of like the Amy Ryland's case. It's just like, oh my God, it's that triangle. Is that one triangle I've been curious about? So, interestingly, only Cleland's recreated triangle was actually equilateral in my survey. I have not found an equilateral triangle out in the wild, let's say. So that's interesting. I need to double check my records on that statement, but I don't remember, and I haven't seen an equilateral triangle in that way. So now let's talk about case studies. These are the dots from the beginning of the presentation. I call this the Asclepian Triangle. I don't know a better way. There's the Project Unity. I used to call it Project Unity Triangle, but the YouTube content creator really, I say, hey, there's geometry in there, and there's so no major response or communication regarding that, even though it's one of the most interesting cases. So this communication came through. And for me, it was really important because of the quality of witness, who the witness is, and who the experiencer is, and the methods they're using to experience and interpret this. And so I characterize that as the name, the Asclepian. This person practices dream incubation and is aware of Asclepian practices. And so because this mark was rather large, its geometry is fairly distinctive and clearly discerned, right? The smaller marks are harder because there's more wiggle room with perspective. This was fairly large. The experiencer is a good observer of internal states, and it is associated in the context with human-initiated contact and exploration of geometric communications with non-human intelligences. So this mark isn't a mystery, let's say, like these were in the 90s or 80s. That no one is going, oh, maybe I was abducted. People are saying, well, what sort of communication is happening here? So that's really important. And that's why I named this the Asclepian. And that's why this triangle is the guide by which I'm comparing all the other triangles here. So you'll see a series of dots that look like this. They'll be colored. Sometimes I'll drop them in on different other photographs, and I'm basically doing that in order to demonstrate congruence. So when you look at this triangle, I will contextualize it next with geometric constructions. But whenever you see this, then you'll know that the geometric construction that describes this triangle describes what it overlays as well, or is congruent with. So is it an equilateral triangle? No, it's not. Looking at this, you can clearly see it's close, but not exactly. And that's why I call this Near Equilateral Triangle phenomenon, NET. This is a much better construction. So this is a very, very simple construction. So as you can see, its elegance, it's Vesica Pisces, it's the setup for the golden section. And if I were to connect the bottom intersection point of the Vesica Pisces with this intersection point up here, draw it through that line, it would divide the Vesica Pisces with in the golden section. But instead, I connect that point, the intersection point, that would set up the golden ratio with this dot, the edge of the Vesica Pisces. That gives me the side, and then all I have to do to get the length of that side is to follow that circle and find the intersection. So that's a pretty elegant construction, and that really describes this Asclepian triangle I'm observing. Project Unity is I've mentioned it before, this is the first place I really discovered this. I said, this isn't equilateral, what is this? And I used this naive method of drawing a circle around the size of the dot and moving it in a very kind of naive point-by-point way to really draw kind of left to right the circle. This is the naive construction that sort of construction method I did on my own dots. And then I know that I need to move into the Vesica Pisces. So this is the elegant solution to this. Here there are something like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 circles. And here we have 2 circles. So that's much, much simpler. Here is the example of the framework on together. And so you can see that my description using the naive construction method was very, very close, but not perfect. Doesn't click in the same way that the new construction clicks for me. Here you can see the Project Unity dots on that. So this is a graphic I made that combines Project Unity's body mark. So you can see the relative size of that. That's a pretty decent sized body mark. Now on top of it, I drop many others, about 6 other triangle marks from a variety of places on the internet that are associated with ET dreams or abduction tales. And I'm just showing that these are highly congruent. They're very similar triangles. They're not out of the order, and you can see how well they line up. Is sort of, there's some wiggle room, but they do really more or less line up. And so that feels to me like a distinctive communication associated with these triangles rather than just the fact that they're triangles. They're this triangle. So I wanted to compare that with an equilateral mark. This is the only one I've really studied. The third dot was partially reconstructed by the experiencer. It's from Mike Cleland, who is an experiencer and writer about encounter tales. And as you can see, the equilateral triangle construction really does it for me. It really hits that, and it looks good. This is where I'm applying the framework, the Project Unity framework, that naive construction method, to the equilateral triangle. And you can see the dots of the triangle touch the intersection points of the equilateral, but they don't line up very well, and it doesn't feel like it clicks in the same way. This is using the same method of drawing the framework, but looking at it like an equilateral triangle, meaning everything's centered on the center of those dots, not on weird spots. So it feels much better. This is the level of discernment that we need to go through when we're using geometry to understand body marks, right? It can be really easy to fudge geometry just by looking at it with blurry eyes or something like that. So that's why I keep talking about it. Here is another example of this triangle mark. This is from another experiencer, researcher, writer, writing under the moniker Skeptical Psychic. And it is the same triangle you can see, the near equilateral. So this is the Asclepian's mark on the unity triangle. It demonstrates, yeah, wow, we're talking about the same thing. I wondered if it was on the Great Pyramid or something like that. And it's like, no, it's not really. But it did fit in a recent wave of Reddit reports. So here is one which was posted by a concerned husband. The wife had a dream about aliens, discovered the mark, and it's a near perfect fit. So all of these, the Reddit reports are really, really interesting because I've been watching that for about a year, and there's waves of body marks. And I think some people are responding. They go, I see that triangle mark. I had one. Let me post it. Something like that happened recently over the last 4 months. And then recently, the last 2 to 4 weeks, there's been a lot of posting around this. And it's pretty consistent. Here's another one. Experiencer discovered blood stains on the bed, which is this is also consistent with Dr. Karla Turner case. Could not find the mark on the shoulder. It was associated with tingling. And here's another mark that the experiencer spotted the mark, sought explanations from various subreddits, including alien abduction. The line in the right side of it here fits in well with construction marks, and if again fits the Asclepian triangle. Here's another one I thought was really interesting. On the bottom image, you can see the arrows just pointing to these sort of discolorations of the flesh, of the skin. It's seen as scars, and the marking was associated with dreams of flatworms and entities the experiencer considered abduction, and then made the post based on the popularity of triangles now on that subreddit. And even the scar marks on this person's body aligns really well with the Asclepian triangle. So that tells me something. I'm not sure quite what, but it does. Another colleague sent me an image of a body mark, and this fits the triangle 4 times over. This is a sort of rough Pythagorean decad. Another experiencer researcher, and the triangles are in a near golden ratio proportion, the smaller ones to the larger ones, right? So that's kind of a beautiful thing to see. Here is the Asclepian triangle on Amy Rylance's mark, who was an abductee a couple decades ago, has a very strongly documented case. So it involves teleportation and abduction, very, very similar, as you can see. Her mark is characteristic of many small abduction marks. And this is why I say this is interesting, because this image of Amy Rylance's body mark came from a republication, on YouTube of an interview that was probably stored on VHS. And there's so much loss of signal, right? It's fuzzy, but you can see there's, several seconds of clip of a photograph they're showing or of the mark, and can pick it up. And I selected what seemed to be the clear one, but you can verify that. Then you can drop in known triangles and go, this explains it. And you can say, hey, this is really strong proof of something. We're identifying that this triangle is, the triangle in Amy Rylance's body mark is similar to the Asclepian mark, which means it's a near equilateral triangle, which connects it to this series of other near equilateral triangles. And so that's interesting to me. So, basically, to sum up this unity triangle paradox, it's a clearly discernible pattern. The construction method I used was possible but not elegant. It's obviously meaningful, but I'm not sure how. It is connected with human-initiated contact and light orbs, as well as abduction narratives, right? So I was like, what is this? That's where I'm at. That's the paradox. Why don't I know more? How can I understand it? Why don't the experiencers really create an effort to understand the geometry of these triangles? That's the question I have to. That's in part the paradox. So I presented myself a challenge. So the craft was obviously meaningful. I was unable to draw it within the Vesica Pisces. It's not yet connected to Blanchette's larger mathematical communication. So this was the context, and I just wanted to revisit this sense of learning in my journey, because this video now is documentation of my inquiry. And I have to say, I didn't understand something before about 3 days ago, and I understand something much better now. And that movement is demonstration of engagement with non-human intelligence in a way. So the insight I had about 5 days ago is that the maybe a week now, that the golden section is the primordial fractalization that Jimmy Blanchette's talking about. And it's obvious because he tells us that is 1/phi is the primordial fractalization. And he describes that in terms of geometric harmonics, relating that to physics and light and space and things like that. But I'm just focusing in on this notion of 1/phi. So you can see the Vesica Pisces, the width of that you could define as 1. And if you divide it using this construction, that's the golden section, you're creating 1/phi basically. And you're creating the 0.618 number here. So that's pretty beautiful to see. And so I say this construction is actually the primordial fractalization that we're talking about. And therefore, I should be able to use that to express the triangles that Jimmy Blanchette's seeing. So if I can use this framework to understand the ununderstood communications from Jimmy Blanchette's orbs or radios, then it's showing a self-consistent messaging system. Jimmy's getting this information in number. I'm seeing this in geometry. No one's actually looked at the geometric aspects of this in this way. And therefore, if we use the geometry that's informed by the number to understand the phenomena of his light orbs, then that's something. Right? So what if the golden ratio craft could be drawn in relation to that image? I just walk through some of the implications. It would be something like proof of communication. So why is the Vesica Pisces important? Well, it's actually a numeric framework. So you can see the special numbers come out of, special square rooted numbers come out of this. 1, 2, 3, 4 is in there, obviously, and you can keep going. There's many different mathematical numbers and physical constants that can emerge out of this framework. So it connects the body marks and UAPs to the radius of a circle described as the width of the Vesica Pisces. It relays all the proportions in the mark or the UAP to a self-consistent number space. So as soon as we draw a circle around it, it is now relating it to a self-consistent number space we can use to compare it across any other manifestation of that geometry. So the method I'm using is very simple. You find the longest line in the figure and make that the radius of the circle that defines the Vesica. So it's a pretty simple method, and it should produce these insights that are mappable to this, self-consistent number space. So we need to get into ruler and compass constructions. I want to go through this so you have a sense of what ruler and compass is. So I'm going to start this, and I'll just narrate it as we go. This is a basic experience. So here, let me get full screen. Drawing a line. Drawing a circle. Sorry. I understand now. All right, we're going to draw that circle. Oh my God. Draw a circle, Vesica Pisces, bisecting that Vesica Pisces. Then I'm going to draw a larger circle using the diameter of the first circle as the radius. So then now it will cut the original circles at a point. That intersection point is essential to everything that I'm doing, that point right there, because when you connect it to the base of the Vesica, you divide the width of the Vesica in the golden ratio, and those are my calipers that are proving that. So that's these are the fundamental tools, the bisection and the golden section of the Vesica. That's it. So let's keep going. This is an example of Jimmy Blanchette's craft. Let me just bring that up.
I will not go through it too much in detail here, but it is a very important.
Okay, so let me walk through this. So this triangular craft, this is an image of his radio situation. So he sends out radio waves through this antenna directed at, this might be Arcturus or a planet. Then he films the sky. And these are really generally only a few seconds or a few frames. And he sees a manifestation of light orbs, right? That's what we believe they are, or something like that, or a craft. He zooms in and then he measures it. And that's the sighting. That's it. Right? And he explains it and understands it.
I
right?
included the golden ratio proportions that they were communicating to me.
So you see he's having a back and forth. He's seen these images. You can see this is another manifestation of the same craft, right? And so that's pretty beautiful to see. So now, how do you draw that? So let me show you. I've printed them out. So now I'm drawing the longest line, the line through the longest side. I'm taking that as the radius of the circle that defines the vesica. I'm doubling that so I can find the point that gives me the golden section. I'm going to now make the golden section in the vesica, and that intersects actually with the vertex of the golden ratio craft. I found the bisection of that line, and now I'm taking the difference of the bisection and the golden section, and I'm casting a circle around the golden section intersection point in order to describe where along that slanted line the third dot is. And now that I've described that, I can draw in the sides of the triangle. And that's a very elegant construction for the golden ratio craft. That was the inspiration for all of this presentation, actually, that construction right there. So he's got another craft that shows up. Again, he's sending it to Arcturus. He's seeing these responses. This one has puzzled me a lot because it has the characteristic of the light orb manifestation, especially some movement in one of the orbs, slight movement that seems important. And that'll come up later in a body mark I'll show. But I wanted to find a way of constructing it in the same way. So again, I printed it out. Longest side, connecting the longest side. Now drawing the radius of a circle to make the vesica of absolutely the longest. So it's like I work with the sides of the dots in this case, not the center of the dots, although you can do that. You can work with the center of the dots. If you're working with, like proportional triangles. So I'm now drawing in the double sized circles to find the intersection point for the golden ratio. But I'm now doing something interesting. So I've bisected it, golden sectioned it, and then I connect the point of the center of the figure with that point for the golden section up in the top right. So top right to bottom left. Right now, I'm casting the difference between the bisection and the golden section point on the right side so that I can get the size of this circle, which then describes where the top is placed along that diagonal line we drew. So, and now I have all the points in the construction to make the size of the triangle. So that's basically using an additional line and an additional circle, but sort of reflecting some of the values around the vesica. And that's about it. So we'll continue on. So at this point, I then said, hey, I wonder if we could use this framework, the same way of drawing it, with this project Unity. So here's a synchronicity. So this is the thumbnail for the project Unity video. And here's light orbs, and those are from Linda Aurora's video, Human Initiated Contact. The Project Unity content creator didn't have videos of his orbs, so he used this. This is the same video that connected me and Jimmy Blanchette. Actually, he analyzed these and said, "Hey, there's geometry in here," and I got connected to him through a synchronicity associated with that. This is an image of the body mark, and we don't need to go into this experience. It's interesting, but not for the purpose of this demonstration right now. So again, they're printed out. Longest line. There's a little bit of figuring out how that works, where the center of these circles are. I'm continuing on. Yeah, one circle to make the vesica, another circle to make the vesica. Then I'm going to make the larger circle to cut the vesica width in the golden ratio. So I have those intersection points now. I'm going to connect the top right point, that essential point, to another point in the figure, and that's what I'm showing. And this is pretty elegant because there needs to be no other circle drawn. That the original Vesica Pisces circle defines where along that diagonal line the dot is placed, and that's it. That's a very elegant. This is a very, very elegant example of construction using this method. So let's keep going. So this is just a reminder, right? Everything, all the triangles that fit on top of Project Unity fit on that construction, including this one, the Asclepian triangle. And we'll just walk through this drawing so you can I can show that. I'm showing that these two triangles are described by the same construction. This is very simple, but it's essential for your mind to go, these three dots equal this, this equals that, therefore those two marks are somehow equivalent. Vesica Pisces here in the construction. Finding those golden section intersection points. Going to draw the lines. So that gets me the angle of the line. This gets me the length. And now just completing the sides. All right. So this is drawing them all together. This is why I say it's a framework. We'll get this going pretty fast. If you want to go at normal drawing speed, you can see the videos I made for these. They'll be linked below. All right, so I figured out the best size of the circles for the page, drawing in the vesica, bisecting it, going to golden section. So that's a diagonal. I'm setting up the lines necessary to draw the triangles. That's the golden section, and this is another diagonal used to define some of the craft, showing the golden ratio. So now I'm going to draw the golden ratio craft by figuring out where along one of those lines that dot gets to be placed, and that determines you define the line and you define the distance along the line that determines the length of the sides. So the length of one side is the vesica, and then you define the length of the other two sides in relationship to these essential lines in the construction. So this is the second craft, which I'm calling the reflected golden ratio craft. The second one from Jimmy Blanchette. And now I'll do the circle, right? I'm now just showing, hey, I don't need to draw that circle. It's already implicit in the lines I've made. So now I'm just making the shape of the Asclepian Triangle, the Project Unity Triangle, the Near Equilateral we're studying. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so that basically goes to Dr. Karla Turner. So this is what I've looked at so far. That's a lot. And now I got to the point where I thought, I need to find some more information. So Dr. Karla Turner was recommended to me by the Asclepian, as well as the recent podcast I was on with Night Shift. And I thought, wow, this is, I started to dive into it more and actually read the texts and stuff like that. When you're doing scholarly work, you sometimes read books in a scholarly way, which is very quick, but you look at references, you look at the kind of shape and size of the argument. I go, this is first-person testimony. It's not supported by any references to scholarly material necessarily. It's not presenting any raw data, and therefore it can be categorized in a certain way. But this first-person account of these experiences is just incredible. So I'm really grateful for the recommendations. And one of the things that came up really quickly when I started studying Dr. Karla Turner is her focus on body marks, particularly triangle marks that she called equilateral. So I thought, oh my God, even in the cover of her book, Into the Fringe, there is this sort of red dot triangle, equilateral. I go, oh my God, she thinks these are equilateral, but she's probably documenting the triangle that I'm documenting, the Near Equilateral Triangle. That's what I thought. And so I thought, would the actual photos of the body marks reveal an equilateral or near equilateral triangle? And I produced this graphic to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. So the three kind of light orange dots are dots that are taken from her book. So that it shows me that's an equilateral triangle that she's put on the cover of her book. And it's not the near equilateral, which you should by now recognize here. So that's important to know. So it looks like perhaps the triangle we're looking at. So this says, hey, near equilateral triangle body mark phenomenon is happening into the fringe. How is it happening? Well, it would be proof for me if it was the exact same type, but we'll get to it. I wanted to read a bit from the book because she describes the first-person account of describing these triangles. So James is a family friend and or a friend of her son, it might be her son. I can't remember exactly. I read this rather quickly. I'll probably review it a number of times because it's a fascinating work. So to get into it, there's one more thing James said, and he's continuing his description of new phenomena. Standing up, he turned around, showing us the back of his cap. I found these marks this morning, he pointed, and I don't know where they came from. There were 3 large puncture marks on his skin arranged in an equilateral triangle. So now I question, is it actually equilateral? James had never told us of having any marks or scar on his body before, and it was easy to see how deeply the triangle upset him. The arrival of a new group of alien beings and the appearance of 3 punctures seemed to be more than coincidental. Until now, I was the only one in the group who'd been marked with a triangle, yet we'd learned that this was an insignia left by at least one of the alien groups. There was nothing we could do for James but commiserate, and so he soon left. Casey, her husband, and I immediately checked our own bodies to see if we might have happened to us. If anything might have happened to us. On my right hip, I found a single puncture. There was a dried, smeared drop of blood on my ankle. She continues. Scratches and bruises and needle-like puncture marks are infuriating. As evidence of alien contact, they are useless if there is no memory of an event to go with them. We were the only ones who could truly know that a bruise or a scratch had not been on our body the night before, that it wasn't the result of an accidental self-inflicted clumsiness during the day. Now I'm saying if there's geometry in here that's discernible and meaningful, even if it were self-inflicted clumsiness, because of the intuition of meaning and the geometric nature, it is actually meaningful and worthy of exploration like any other omen we might receive from the world. So we checked our bodies regularly and made mental note of any bump or scratch from known sources. Still, marks appeared on random mornings after nights of apparently undisturbed sleep. So here this is setting up the context that these marks appear at night, and oftentimes they do, or they're discovered in the morning and assumed to occur at night. So I needed to figure this out, right? So I found 2 lectures that present body mark data and geometric data. So what would it mean if these marks were shaped like the near equilateral triangle we examined? Would it prove that dreams are real and that abductions are dreamlike? So that's the question I have. So let me just show you kind of what's going on in the lecture.
Talked about so many times, the triangle of punctures on Jane's arm are typical of what most of us have had recurrently.
Triangle of puncture on the arm are typical of what we had, but I don't see anything in here. This is a really tough video to work with, but that's kind of where we're at. Then it covers some other slides, drawings, cattle mutilations, UFO stuff, helicopters. So here is one of the triangles that I found in that. So I scanned through the lecture and I took out anything that looked like a triangle. This is a hat man, and hat man is really fascinating. This might, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what this is. This looks to me like a hat man, to be honest. And hat mans are sort of like shadow people creatures, and they show up in sleep paralysis experiences. It's pretty well known now. But I just sort of laughed that one of the first appearances of the Asclepian triangle was a sort of hat man creature. So she also has this note, and I'm not sure if this is from her or an experiencer. It says, symbols I've seen. These now look like equilateral triangles, but if we compare it to the Asclepian triangle, one looks more like the Asclepian triangle than the other. The top one looks like that near equilateral, and the bottom looks pretty equilateral, but we can test with equilateral triangles. And so that seems like a fair assessment, although, you know, these are drawn, so we can't really say there's anything really meaningful. I say it's more meaningful that this triangle shape is present in the face drawing than in these. But I'd like to see strong congruence, so this is sort of just speculation. Here we have a zoom in. So we'll do this sort of practice throughout the rest of the experience. I mean, the top one is a near perfect fit. The bottom one, not so much. So remember that arm series of puncture wounds that's typical. I wanted to see if I could get any information from the really low resolution video of it's like a digital conversion of a VHS tape probably that was filmed a decade earlier, involving a projected slide that was derived from a photographic negative. So there's like 9 steps or whatever between the actual evidence in this analysis here. But we can use computers to sort of help out. You can start to see, okay, well, changing some of the levels, I can start to see a triangle. If I start to sharpen it, wow, actually, I'm starting to see something, right? That hey, something is really there. Is it the Asclepian triangle? Well, it sort of fits from first guess, right? So I put in those blue dots are the Asclepian triangle, the near equilateral. I added the equilateral triangle in. It looks like it's a near equilateral, but not quite, right? And so let's zoom in, right? But again, it's sort of really, it's almost impossible to tell with this one. Zooming in, again, impossible to tell. Once again, another frame, another method. Sort of feeling like it, Who knows, right? Who knows? But that sort of tells me, wow, hey, this is sort of looking like the triangle we're talking about. It's very inconclusive at this point. So I go to another lecture, which has more information here.
These were in November of '88. And then we also had have what we've come to call a little ET brand, the triangle mark, and they come in a variety of types. Here's one that I had on the morning of November 1st, 1988, a triangle of punctures into the neck area over a vein area. Triangle bruise patterns also turn up. This one on the back of the calf. And these lines that you see that are sort of light rays coming out, those are just reflections from the lighting when the slide was taken. They're not really on the body, but you will see the 3 white balls that make a triangle down toward the bottom of one of those lines. That's a permanent mark. A red triangle, again, the photos are so much more clear than the slides, I have to apologize. A red triangle mark on my husband's leg. Within the red triangle are 3 white balls. Again, they're much more visible from the actual photograph, but a variety of triangle marks. And this is from one of the women whose material will be included in the book I'm working on now down in Central Texas, who had an extraordinary experience where she gained time in an encounter rather than losing it, and ended up with, probably 18 or more different marks, bruises, punctures, and scratches, and so on.
Okay, so that gives you an example of a type of mark she's working with. So I need to introduce some new constructions that will help out using the method. I was unable to create exactly the same method, but again, it uses the Vesica Pisces, and instead of bisecting and golden sectioning the width of the Vesica Pisces, all we do is the same procedures of bisection and golden section of the vertical dimension of the Vesica Pisces. So that's it to describe the construction method. So this is a guess, this is a guess, and this is another guess. These are all from associated with her slides. Look at the similar construction method. It's just, this is golden section of the radius, right from here to here, from the center up. This is bisection of that same radius, let's say, and then this is golden section of that radius. So, excuse me, this was golden section of the entire vertical length. This is bisection of that kind of half of that vertical length. And this is, again, a golden section of half of that vertical length. So this is, it's very similar to how we do the other constructions. All right, so so let's actually, hang on. I want to make sure the right series, yeah, this will be fine. So this is her husband's mark. That's Casey. Can we do anything with it? Well, we can sharpen this triangle, right? And then we can overlay the estimates of what this is. I think this is the near equilateral that we were looking at with the Asclepian or Project Unity. But here's the equilateral. Here's the near equilateral. There's one that fits much better for me, right? Let's go dot dot. Not so good. This is better, so again, it's not perfect. And then she says there's some white balls in it. So I thought, I mean, that sort of looks like a fit. It's really hard to tell because of the photo to the video thing. So here is her brand that she talks about. And this is when the film zoomed in, right? So we have 3 marks that are pretty distinctive. We can enhance the photo to really get the size of those marks. And this is a pretty good example of photograph stuff we can work with very strongly. There's multiple different frames that we can consider, and we can do this process that's pretty repeatable to enhance or sharpen the differences of color. So when I take it, extract it, this is the shape that I'm left with. And it's very, very clearly not the Asclepian triangle. So this is the second, really like a second test we're looking at in this lecture. Go, nope, this does not fit. Equilateral does in a way, right? In a way it does, but it doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense. This triangle actually feels like it makes much more sense to me. But again, there's this sense of length in the lower dots. And so there's a number of ways to consider it, but we can start moving forward through some of our examples to get clarity. So this is from the bruises on the leg, starting to look a lot like the ET brand that she talks about on her neck. Overlaying those images, we say, hey, yeah, there's a lot of congruence there. This is giving me a sense of perhaps maybe this is the design, and maybe the intersection between these is the design, and everything else is kind of an accident. That could be the case. So I apply the triangle I think is best. Here's another triangle that I think might explain it, and yeah, it looks pretty good. So, but not for the original one. But for the second one, yeah, but not the original one. So I then brought in another triangle I've been working with. This is from Reddit, the recent Reddit stuff, and those are the 3 darker red dots. And I say, wow, that's a perfect fit for the construction I thought it was. So this is the post. And so, like I said, I've been confirming these things through waves of synchronicity. Like if I look in the past and within hours, I look on Reddit or these other sources of body mark photos I see in reports, and I'm like, oh my God, here's a report. I go, how do I reconcile them? Like, because oftentimes there will not be this level of triangle posting, except when I am supposed to look into triangles or am. So that's amazing. But the experiencer says, me too. Been getting these 3 dot triangles since I was a child. They show up unexpectedly and disappear in a similar fashion. This is the alien abduction subreddit, and it's in relation to this observed prevalence or popularity of the triangle posting. So I took that image because it reminded me of the dots, and I overlaid it, and I say, hey, there's really strong kind of notion that something's happening. Here is the recent posting of triangles. We've covered this one. This one I haven't looked into too much. I believe we've looked into this one. It's like this one, and these 2 ones are sort of what Casey's triangle looked like, but I didn't evaluate them yet. So now back to the kind of figuring out what is the proportions. I say it's the brown one, but it could be this one, which relates to the bottom. So we have top, middle, and bottom of the brand dots to kind of explain or describe it. We can describe them in these different ways. So now I'm introducing, this is the construction, right, that I think fits best with a brand. And we'll look at those, but I just wanted to show that here and in the inquiry, kind of summing it up. Here is the triangle mark from that book Taken that is involved with a lot of phenomena. We enhanced it to show where the dots are, and we can draw that line, right? That triangle, that orange triangle that I presented here in the ET brand. So isn't it amazing that Karla Turner's brand has the 3 dots, and 2 of the dots are smeared. And if you imagine the dots at the start point, they're the same kind of, they imply the same triangle as another experiencer she looks at. If the middle point, it's confirmed by Reddit or similar to one in Reddit. And then the bottom point, it's triangle similar to one in her book. So that's the triangle that we're working with. So here, I now am applying the construction that I really think it is. This is the middle one. Zooming in, that's what we get. That feels like it makes sense to me, right? So that's the construction. So now let's turn into these 3 white dots. So we're enhancing them, showing them. So this now actually is, I believe, the final body mark triangle of this lecture from 1993. And I overlaid the Asclepian dots on it, right? Isn't that amazing? Right there. And then I connect those lines taken from the construction of that triangle. So that really shows me that this triangle is the Asclepian triangle we've been looking for, right? So we have 3 triangles in this video. Two are directly related to, 2 are very similar to the ET brand, right? That sort of thing. And another one kind of fits in. So it's like, it's amazing. So 3 relate directly to Karla Turner, and the 4th relates to this Asclepian triangle. So we've got a near equilateral. It's saying, hey, here is a near equilateral in Karla Turner's reference, the kind I was expecting to see. And then we see 3 others that may be described in not the same way, but a very related way. So this graphic summarizes what I'm thinking about. This graphic has the equilateral triangle. It has the unity triangle framework, I was calling it, the 554.3. And it has the equilateral triangle, the big red dots from Into the Fringe book. And this now has the Asclepian dots on it showing, hey, this is what I was looking for. It's here, right? And then here I'm placing in the ET brand, and that is from Karla Turner. Look how well that fits in with the geometry there. And here's the construction to go on top of that. So I wanted to summarize. This is the construction for the UAP Orbs from Jimmy Blanchette, as well as the Asclepian triangle, the biggest triangle there. And that's the example. This is the framework. All of the triangles are based upon the Vesica Pisces, the division of the golden section, and casting different lines from this one point down to different meaningful points in the construction to determine the angle or the placement of the vertex of the triangle. So that's there. Right, I'm overlaying one of the triangles from Karla Turner. You can see that the lines sort of add up. I mean, it's not like they're really so far out of the way. And then here's a final one. So again, they're sort of lining up. If I was better at lining them up with scale or rotate in the graphic program, it would be a lot clearer. But it's still pretty meaningful. So I want to put forward the near equilateral triangle body mark phenomena definition. These are triangles associated with extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, encounter, intuition, or dreams. The intuition is that the triangle is perfect or equilateral. It's typically non-harmful, punctures that do not itch or hurt. It occurs in waves of synchronicity, like my personal discoveries of my body marks, the Turner's experiencers, or the recent wave of Reddit reports. It has distinctive geometry, which is based upon the bisection and golden section of the horizontal length of the Vesica Pisces for the Orb UAPs, or the Asclepian Near Equilateral Triangle, as I've been observing, and also the bisection and golden section of the vertical length of the Vesica Pisces for Turner's ET brand Near Equilateral Triangle. So here we have 2 types of near equilateral triangles that are constructions that can describe the triangles in Turner's lectures, as well as the ones we're seeing reported in association with alien abduction or contact. And they're described using the Vesica Pisces and bisection of the Vesica Pisces dimensions using bisection and golden section. So that, I mean, it's the same, very similar methods, describing very similar things in very similar contexts. So I think there is a pattern here that is really interesting to explore. To summarize here, we have Vesica Pisces in this shape and the left and right. And we can see that on the left image, it is bisected and then golden sectioned the horizontal line. And then the same thing happens is bisection and golden sections of the vertical lines to describe the vertex of the triangles. So that's pretty interesting to me. Again, here is the sort of horizontal golden section and bisection. This is the Jimmy Blanchette's triangles. This is the Asclepian triangle. This was the solution. This is the solution to a number of the paradoxes or problems I was exploring with body marks and UAP communications. This is the vertical framework of bisecting the vertical dimension or golden sectioning it to produce these triangles. And this describes Dr. Karla Turner's triangular research. This is all of them together. Now, it seems probably complicated. The blue line are the vertical ones. That's the Karla Turner stuff. The red lines is like Jimmy Blanchette, Asclepian triangle. They're working together really well. I think this image shows a lot of coherence, actually, and a sense of beauty almost. And so I would even see this drawn out into a mandala of sorts to see what that looks like. I did something similar in terms of conceptualizing or bringing into a single mandala the stuff I'm observing. And this mandala is what I call the mandala of the symmetry of rationality and irrationality. This comes from a page in my book, Galathog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. This expresses the insight I was encountering with my body mark and UAP research at that time. So it basically says you gotta work with bisection and golden section, and those two together in this field of wholeness is the message. That for me was the message of a lot of the geometry. So the next steps in the research I think, is to work with the body mark experiencers in a dream group to explore what's there, right? What's the lived experience? I want to find some more definitive documentation of Turner's triangle body mark research, and I want to use the new framework to produce a human-initiated contact experience message and see the results of that. If you have had a geometric body mark or UAP encounter and would like to have a conversation to share your documentation for research or to ask questions, please email me at daniel@dseti.org or go to dseti.org for more information. It'd be really helpful to have photographs and stories of body marks or triangle craft or anything like that. Anything that can really be mapped with geometry as well as associated with intuitions of meaning like dreams or downloads or just telepathic contact or whatever. All right, so now it's time for reflections. Thank you for being on this journey with me of exploring the geometry. We've gone through a lot of slides. These are a lot of experiences, right? It's really easy to go through slides of experiences and not reflect that this is the lived experience of someone, that the triangle mark, you discover that on your body and you go, how did this happen? Especially the puncture ones, especially the ones that seem to draw into the flesh. How does that actually happen? And then observe the congruence of that mark with many other marks, right? It's not just every triangle in the world. It's very specific triangles that can be described using similar geometry and set in proportion with one another. That's fascinating to me. I'm not 100% convinced that this inquiry isn't driven forward by confirmation bias, right? It's not, I'm not convinced that. I think these things might be documentations of anomalies that are synchronistic with meaningful events. And that's sort of my baseline hypothesis here, is these are omens. And omens don't actually have to be miraculous. They are just meaningful by way of personal synchronicity. And so that's what I'm saying seems to be the case here, at least. But on the other side of it, it seems to be there is the capacity of these others, right, the visitors, the aliens, the non-human intelligences, to move through human experiences, to move through time, and to affect something that is beyond the comprehension of the experiencer. That's what ties it back to the CETI by entanglement paper, is this notion that we're experiencing geometry or math that is beyond our comprehension. I was not able to identify what my body mark was for 6 months. And then 6 months after that, I was like, I had a hard time drawing it. So it took me 6 months to realize this is geometric. Took me another 6 months to really realize how to even draw it in a meaningful way. Took me another 6 months to go, oh, I can use the same way of drawing this as the triangles that have puzzled me. I didn't know how to work with the triangles in that framework, and that's what this discovery is about, is relating the triangle to the Vesica Pisces. Of course, this has been described by thousands of mathematicians in the past. Of course, a geometer whose experience might turn to this and go, this is how you do it. They might not see this as a discovery. I see this work with the Vesica Pisces and the triangles as a discovery because it is an expansion of my intuition. I moved from someone who did not understand how to do it to someone who did know how to do these drawings. And I did so through my personal interactions with NHI dream characters who explained to me how to do this. And I was driven forward by synchronicities and downloads that seem miraculous to me. So it's worth noting. I want to just say that if the geometry felt a little complicated to you, don't worry about it. It's all about actually playing. That's my experience, playing and creating. That's the best way to engage with it. And then with that, the mind starts to engage these things. You start thinking about it, and then the dreams and other things start coming in. That's been my experience. So thank you again for being here on this journey. This is all I really wanted to say. I wanted to present this sort of discovery, this inquiry. This is, I think, the start of, or a continued start of, a much deeper exploration of body marks, of UAP geometries, and things like that. So with that, may you dream well.